Over the past few years, I've become concerned of how society seems to have little understanding about what fascism and communism actually are. I constantly hear people in the media say that President Trump is a fascist. And yes, he does tend to tweet ridiculous things that are fascistic in nature. President Trump isn't more fascist than any other president when you actually look at his actions in office. Many tend to place fascism and communism on the opposite ends of the political spectrum, with fascism being on the extreme right and communism being on the extreme left. This outlook might be technically correct on the European political spectrum. However, on the traditional American political spectrum, where left and right tends to be measured by the amount of economic and social control the government has over a society, with anarchy or no government being on the extreme right, and fascism and communism being on the extreme left. The Communism Memorial Foundation ran a poll on millennials asking whether they would prefer to live in a socialist, communist, fascist, or capitalist nation. 42% said capitalist, 44% socialist, 7% communist, and 7% fascist. First of all, it's super disturbing that only 42% chose capitalism. But anyway, what I want to focus on is how socialism was so high and why communism and fascism were so much lower. I think this shows a lack of education on what these three ideologies actually are, because they're practically the same thing. Let me explain. For this comparison, I'll be looking at specifically the Communist Manifesto and the policies of Mussolini, since there is no accepted global manifesto for fascism. Mussolini led the first fascist party where the word fascist originated, and every fascist is a little different and it would take way too long to compare them all. The roots of fascism and communism were both greatly influenced by Karl Marx. Marx believed that capitalism was an oppressive economic system where the bourgeoisie, the 1% according to Bernie, oppressed the proletarians and hoarded all the wealth. He believed the free market just gave the rich the freedom to take advantage of the poor. The political theory of socialism, which gave rise to communism, had been around for hundreds of years by the time Marx put pen to paper. Marx, also known as the father of communism, spent most of his life in exile in Great Britain and France. He wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848, which later served as the inspiration for the formation of the Communist Party. Communism is also known as Marxism. Marx believed that a truly utopian society must be classless and stateless. Marx's main idea was simple: free the lower class from poverty and give the poor a fighting chance. How he believed it should be accomplished, however, was another story. In order to liberate the lower class, Marx believed that the government would have to control all means of production, so that no one could outdo anyone else by making more money. Unfortunately, that proves to this day to be more difficult than he could have possibly imagined. Marx described three necessary phases toward achieving his idea of utopia. Phase 1. A revolution must take place in order to overthrow the existing government. Marx emphasized the need for total destruction of the existing system in order to move to Phase 2. Phase 2. A dictator or elite leader or leaders must gain absolute control over the proletariat. During this phase, a new government exerts absolute control over the common citizen's personal choices, including his or her education, religion, employment, and even marriage. Collectivization of property and wealth must also take place. Phase 3. Achievement of Utopia. This phase has never been attained because it requires all non-communists be destroyed in order for the Communist Party to achieve supreme equality. In a Marxist utopia, everyone would happily share property and wealth, free from restrictions that a class-based system require. The government would control all means of production so that no one-class system would remain constant, with no possibility of any middle-class citizen rising back to the top. Think of communism as a kind of spin-off of socialism. Socialism advocates for the redistribution of wealth and the elimination of the class system, but they typically try to make change from within the capitalist system. Communism looks to overthrow the capitalist system entirely and to eliminate all non-communists. Fascism is also a spin-off of socialism, and it was started by everyone's favorite mustached Italian, Mussolini. Mussolini was the socialist who loved the idea of revolution. Like many European countries, Italy was devastated after World War I, and they were looking for a strong man to fix their problems, such as the case of most fascist regimes. The king gave Mussolini and his fascist party power over Italy in order to fix their economy. This was basically phase 2 in Marx's quest for utopia. Mussolini took complete control of the economy, and after 3 years he outlawed the opposition to his regime. Mussolini instilled a strong sense of nationalism in the Italian people, which caused hostility to neighboring countries. This formula was followed by the most famous fascist, Adolf Hitler, when the Nazis, or National Socialist German Workers' Party, took over Germany. Mussolini said that both capitalism and Marxism was obsolete and established what he called the third alternative. It was basically rebranded socialism. Preliminary plans as of 1939 intended to divide the country into 22 corporations, which would send representatives to the parliament from each industry. State permission was required for almost any business activity, such as ending employment or expanding a factory. All wages were set by the government. Restrictions on labor were greater, while corporations still could earn profits. Italian fascism supported criminalization of strikes by employees and lockouts by employers as illegal acts it deemed as prejudicial to the national community as a whole. Similar to the Bolsheviks in Soviet Russia, Mussolini nationalized all independent trade unions into one government-operated syndicate, mandating union members for every worker. Like communism, Italian fascism was also completely totalitarian. Everything was done for the betterment of the state. Here's a quote from Mussolini. "Fascism is the only liberty which can be a serious thing, the liberty of the state and of the individual in the state. Therefore, for the fascist, everything is in the state, and no human or spiritual thing exists, or has any sort of value outside the state. In this sense, fascism is totalitarian, and the fascist state, which is the synthesis and unity of every value, interprets, develops, and strengthens the entire life of the people." Fascism and communism could also be described as National Socialism and International Socialism. Communism is about the workers of the world. This is why you see communism spreading across borders as a kind of global movement. When a communist movement is successful in overthrowing the establishment in one country, they tend to aid communist movements in others. For example, the Soviet Union helping Castro in Cuba or supporting the Black Panthers in the United States. Fascism is about the workers of your country. Mussolini believed that socialism and communism couldn't work because they took away the profit and competition that capitalism provided, and thus any incentive to advance society. So he replaced profit with nationalism and competed with other countries. He believed that people are much more willing to fight for their neighbors and those that have the same ethnic background than they would be willing to fight for a stranger that lives on the other side of the planet. Both fascism and communism are completely totalitarian and consequently horrible. Both have complete control over the economy. Both believe in redistribution of wealth and claim to fight for the little guy. Neither believe in freedom of speech and seek to silence opposition. In reality, trying to fit totalitarian regimes into one of these boxes is futile. For any communist dictator, whether it be Mao, Stalin, Castro, etc., a case could be made that they were all fascist as well. The terms fascist and communist have been reduced down to insults. If you're on the left and you don't like someone, you call them a fascist. If you're on the right and you don't like someone, you call them a communist. Can we just agree that totalitarian governments are terrible no matter the side? In the description, I have a link to an article by the Daily Beast that details the 13 most deadly dictators. Some communists, some fascists, all terrible. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more. Follow me on Twitter at ThisMatters6 for news and updates.